The following podcast is provided by Era Living, innovator in residential retirement options since 1987. And welcome everyone to Answers for Elders Radio Network. And we're excited today again to have an amazing partner with Era Living. And Era Living, the thing that's so phenomenal about this organization is they have connections to colleges, universities, great professors, great training programs. And I think that's one of the reasons why their longevity of employees is just forever, because they have so many amazing programs in place. And one of the programs and partnerships that they work with is an organization called the Granger Cobb Institute of Senior Living, and that's through Washington State University and the Carson College of Business. And we are here very lucky to have their CEO and their founder, Nancy Swanger, with us to explain the program with us. So welcome to the show, Nancy.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
You know, Nancy, one of the things I think about is there's so many grandchildren of seniors or are those of us that find a calling when we're caring for a loved one. And I know that probably I would say in my own experience, not an official study, but certainly the people that I meet, a lot of us have a backstory, whether they took care of a loved one, they obviously wanted to, they want to go into the industry, and that's kind of what pulls them there. You obviously started this organization for senior living. How did that happen? And do you have a backstory?
Oh, great question. First of all, yes and no. I have a backstory, but the backstory in my own case didn't come till a bit later. At the time, I was the director of the hospitality school at Washington State University, which, as you mentioned, is housed in the Carson College of Business. And our hospitality school's been around since 1932. It's a highly regarded program, one of the oldest in the country. And we had some senior living operators from the Puget Sound area approach us about a possible collaboration. And I was, as you mentioned, the director of the hospitality school at the time. And honestly, I didn't even know what they were talking about. My parents were in their 80s. They were still living in their own home. When I thought about what they were trying to sell me, I thought, this is a nursing home. I don't get the connection. How am I going to get 18 to 22-year-old students to think about this as a career choice? On and on and on. My head was just spinning out of control. Well, turns out, long story short, I was way off base on all of it with a paradigm that was in my head. And I did some visits to some communities, drank the Kool-Aid, sat down at the table with some industry leaders. We put together some curriculum for an elective course as part of the hospitality curriculum. Fast forward, it's grown over the years. This actually all started in about 2010. However, where we are now is we do have the Granger Cobb Institute for Senior Living. And as part of that, we have a major in senior living management, a minor in senior living management.
That is incredible.
An online, on-demand professional development certificate program in senior living. And so it's just continued to grow and develop, but it had very humble beginnings. Now, I've learned a lot. I knew nothing about the industry to start with. I've learned an immense amount about the industry since.
I know you know. I'm sure you have, my friend.
But the other part of the backstory is then I became an adult consumer of the product. In other words, my dad died about 4 years ago, and my mom was of that generation. She didn't even learn how to drive, and she didn't live in my home in my town. And I'm obviously still working and not retired. I have two older brothers, but as we know, these things happen to fall typically with the only daughter, the oldest daughter, or a daughter-in-law. So I was it, which was awesome because my mom was the best. But I moved my mom into a community down closer to where I was in Pullman, Washington, so that I could see her every day. Her being at home by herself all day was, in my home, would have been a terrible idea. She was in assisted living. She needed a little help. So I learned, so I became the adult child, and I learned a whole lot more about the industry going through that experience with my mom. And now I'm an even bigger believer, and that this is the right path for people, as opposed to being in their own home in isolation.
You know, I think that's one of the biggest misnomers of the world out there is what is senior living all about? Because I know there's such an amazing quality of life that happens when you go there. Your mind gets more activity. There's so much more that happens when you are in a community and not isolated at home, which a lot of seniors are. And they develop depression. They don't eat right. They don't, they don't hydrate. There's so many things that they don't do for themselves because they're not in an environment that contributes to their quality of life. And I think one of the things that you can put together, certainly for those that are interested in going into this field, is kind of help fill in the blanks of what all the services are and where they fit, where they might fit the best. I can only imagine, right, Nancy?
Absolutely. And our real task in all of this, because we're in higher education, is our goal is to educate the next generation of leaders who will be in communities. And we know for the next 40-ish years, the demand on the industry is going to be huge. And quite frankly, demographically, the people who are sort of in a typical caregiver age, if you were, helping with a mom or a dad or a grandparent or another loved one in your home, that demographic is shrinking. There are not enough people to go around. And so our role is trying to, encourage students who have that heart for an aging population to pursue this as a career option. And it's a real natural extension of our hospitality program, because at the end of the day, it is all about relationships and trying to make the difference in the life of a resident. And if you really look at a community and a hotel as an example, operationally, they parallel each other. There's housekeeping and food and beverage and concierge, all these things. So the fit for us in hospitality was perfect.
It's perfect.
And so that's what we're trying to do is help with this workforce crisis and dearth of leadership talent going forward.
Well, it's so important. And you are obviously partners with Era Living. Could you explain to us a little bit about that program?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned to start with, we had 4 operators from 4 different companies initially kind of came together and helped us work on this. And as we started to build it out, again, my background was not senior living. So I say to these people, who next? Who else? Where do we go? We were, we started with Aegis Living, Merrill Gardens at the time, Emeritus, and then Leisure Care. And one of the very next names to come up was, well, you need to be working with Era Living. And so I reached out and was put in contact with some folks there. Ended up Matt Broman, who is
awesome,
the best guy
is
ever.
Amazing.
He sits on our steering committee and has since we got to that point and started having one, because this is a very industry driven program. I don't claim to have all the answers. We literally have run all of our curriculum, everything we do through our industry partners, and Era Living is one of those partners. So we have Matt on our steering committee, which is the best. He's such a great guy. But then Matt, as Matt would, has connected us with some other folks in the company. So like, for example, our class that we're teaching right now, our first class was just on Tuesday night. 2 Tuesday nights from now, we will have in class, it will actually be Zoom this time, but we have Marla Becker, who is the executive director, general manager of Aljoya Mercer Island. We've had Karen Norby as part of that, who has that role of regional operations for ERA. And then my very best part of the story, and this happened even before we started bringing people to class. When I very first started talking about this idea, I was introduced to a woman named Lynn Meyer, and Lynn Meyer is a resident at Aljoya Mercer Island. And Lynn and I hit it off like no other, and she's just a dear friend of mine now. Every time I get over there, I go see her at Aljoya, but she's in class as well. I mean, we do it all virtually, and the students get to hear from a resident. They get, we've put together this little tour of Lynn's beautiful apartment. And so it's all the time. Every term we teach the class spring, fall, summer, and we try to have Lynn and Marla and sometimes Karen, whoever, but as part of that class every time, because their message is so important.
Well, and it's so important too that there is this connection with on the ongoing, the way the world is changing, because we're doing things in different ways. And the way that you guys collaborate, it's like you're on the front lines. You're not telling somebody from behind a curtain about that. You're really in tune with what's happening right now. And I think that's what's so cool. So Nancy, would you fill me in? Like, tell me about some of the students and graduates in your program.
So great question. Here, this is the interesting part. So we just started, the major just became an option beginning in the fall of 20. That was not the best year to be launching anything. We were in, of course, COVID isolation. But so technically, when the first graduates, actual official graduates of the major, really shouldn't happen till about spring of 2024. And then we launched the minor in the, fall of 21. We have since then had 3 students already that have graduated with the minor, majoring in other things. But what I will tell you is, in this first class that we have that introduces them to this idea, it's called Exploring the Business of Aging. That was the first class. It's the first course in the major now related to senior living, but it was an offshoot of the class that we started 2010-ish with the elective course that those industry operators helped us put together. And since that time, we've put almost probably 750, 800 students through that class.
Wow.
Who were studying something else generally and just needed a course and thought it would be interesting. So that's really where we have students who may have graduated in something else, but took the course and ended up in senior living. And we have several of those.
So I bet you too, if somebody has a degree, let's say in business management, they could go into senior living and as an extension of their major. Is that the way it could potentially work?
Absolutely. But I think it's even beyond that. That's a business major, and I think it extends well beyond that. So we have folks with degrees in psychology, sociology, human development. We even had a construction management major last semester. I've got 2 construction management majors in class this spring. So this is an industry that employs everyone. I mean, there's a spot. People are, financing buildings and building buildings and maintaining buildings and counting the money and the nursing side and the care piece and all the operational pieces.
Right.
It really, you could take your degree, sales and marketing, a huge one. If you could take your major and apply it to this industry and population, there's a spot for you. And so that's what we try to teach people.
I love that. Yeah. If they majored in marketing or anything.
Absolutely.
That is so important. And I am so interested in what you do. So if somebody's interested in your program, Nancy, who do they get in contact with and where do they go?
So I would say the easiest thing to do would just be to Google Granger Cobb Institute for Senior Living. That's probably, because me trying to just rattle off that website is ugly. So especially if you're just listening to this, if it's in front of you, that would be different. So I would say Google the Granger Cobb Institute for Senior Living. Our page will come up if you scroll down that page, there's some contact information for me and or Darcy Baggett, who is the other half of the Granger Cobb Institute. Our phone numbers are on there, email addresses. My email address it's all lowercase. Well, it's even hard to spell. SWANGER. It's swanner@wsu.edu. My phone number is 509-335-2443.
Well, Nancy, it's been such an honor and a pleasure to have you on the program. And I hope we get a chance to talk to you again sometime soon.
I hope so too. Thanks for having me.
Era Living is locally owned and operates 8 premier retirement communities in Seattle, Renton, Mercer Island, Bellevue, and Issaquah. From vibrant, independent living to compassionate assisted living to secure memory care, Era Living respects and honors older adults by enhancing the quality of their lives. Learn more at eraliving.com.